Ever since the day that I was truly introduced to anime by my friend, I have always had these moments where anime really reminds me that it's not just a cartoon like some people want to believe. It was one day when he showed me the movie Akira that I realized, wow, drawn animation can do more than just be Looney Tunes and make me laugh. They can actually invoke emotion, captivate me, and have the hairs on my skin standing up. So with this particular video series, what I want to do is I want to travel down memory lane and really jump into a whole bunch of series and let you guys know the greatest moments in anime that really did have me. Before I get started, I definitely want to welcome you guys to go down in the comments down below and let me know the greatest moments in anime that you've ever experienced. I want to make this a regular video series, so I'm going to need some ideas and some reminders of some moments. I know specifically in one of my live streams, somebody mentioned one of these in this list, and I said, oh yeah, that's gotta go in the list. Also, it's important to note that yes, these will be some slight spoilers in this list. I'm not getting into like, oh my gosh, the moment this character died. These are kind of just moments that I think in itself are really fantastic that people should check out. So if you're really sensitive to spoilers, you might want to skip some of these, but again, they're not going to be like huge pivotal points in the story. So with that, let's get into this list of the greatest moments in anime in history. For my first one to highlight in this series, we have Terror in Resonance. Now, granted, this is a series that had a lot of mixed reactions around it. It was a series that I really did love. And I think one of the moments in the series that really cemented into my mind the fantastic work of the director, the music, and everything ramping up was the Ferris wheel scene. Now, this is an event that happened in episode 9. Lisa, one of the main characters, ends up getting captured and put into a Ferris wheel. And she's trapped there with a load of bombs on a vest. And this forces one of the characters to have to come save her. And the reason why I like this episode so much, or at least this scene so much, is that it was a culmination of so many things. Obviously, you have a lot of conflict in the character coming there to save Lisa. You have this feeling of kind of helplessness. And the music, Yoko Kanno kicking up the music, was so beautiful. There was a sense of dread here, like something was impending, an impending doom was coming, and nobody could do anything about it. The characters felt frustrated. They felt terrified, and it didn't feel like anything was going to resolve well. This was a losing battle. And it felt like that. The scene portrayed it. The emotion portrayed it. The character's voicing portrayed it. I got so emotional. I'm going to say this several times throughout this entire list, by the way. I got so emotional rewatching this clip. It got me. The emotion was there. The voicing was perfect. The music was fantastic. And the scene portrayal was outstanding. To this day, every time I think of a greatest moment, there's a couple of them, and this is one of them. This is a moment I will never forget. It was just so well done. And I definitely recommend, as always, for people to check out Terror in Resonance. For my next greatest moment in anime history, we have when supernatural battles became commonplace. Now, this is a series that I think was way under the radar. Most people weren't even paying attention to this show, but this is a show that really did shock me in so many ways. It basically follows a club room of people who've all gained supernatural abilities, and one such character is Judai, and he has a really terrible ability, but Judai is special in the idea that he's a chuuni. So he's being a chuuni character, he likes to act like he's got the demon eye and over-exaggerate things and turning everything into weird things. He really does embody that idea of the chuuni, or adolescent syndrome if you want the Western term, I guess. But being as this was kind of a more bubbly, fun show, not really taking too many things seriously, there was one point that really did shock me. It's that idea of having this show that seems so carefree, and then at some point, things get serious. And that was in episode 7, specifically surrounding Hatoko. And Hatoko is this girl that's always been the friend of Judai his entire life, as a childhood friend. And being that he's so chuuni and he likes to act out this persona, she's never really truly understood it, but she's always supported him. Until this one moment. The moment that she snaps. There's a scene where they're in this kitchen and Judai is talking about all this chuuni stuff, and at some point, Hatoko says, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, tell me what you're talking about." And he keeps saying, "No, you won't understand. You won't understand. And eventually she snaps. I have to give huge props to the Seiyu Sayori Hayami. She did an absolutely incredible job with this, say it so it was a rant, a very long rant. And there's so many things to this scene that every time I watch it, it blows me away. And as she's going through her rant, you quickly realize something. She's always heard him. She's telling him all these things that he says, all these things that he does. To a T, she knows every single one of his quirks. She knows everything that he says. She just doesn't understand why he says it. And this whole rant is her basically saying, I don't understand the language you're speaking. Tell me. Explain it to me. And again, it's so kind of dumb to think on the outside looking in how insignificant this is. The guy's just a chuny. But at the same time, you realize through the voice acting, the emotion in her rant, that this girl wants to understand him. And she's struggling so hard to understand him. And it was such a beautifully portrayed scene. The entire time she is ranting, it seemed like for 5 minutes straight, Judai's just standing there. We joked about it when we reviewed it. It was like he was standing there like, oh crap, I broke her. Like she's broken and I don't know what to do. He just stood there because he couldn't say anything. And she was berating him, trying emotionally to understand him. And it was just a, oh my God, it's just a fantastic. I actually got emotional this time watching that one too. I actually got all teared up like, holy crap, you can understand this girl. She's trying so hard. Moving on to our next moment, we have Gangsta. Now, put aside your frustrations with how that ended and how essentially this was the last product of Manglobe as we know it. The studio that created this series didn't do too well, and they end up going under at the end of this whole thing. We didn't really get any kind of continuation. It ended on a really bad note. But aside from all the controversy surrounding Gangsta, there was one thing that had me going from the very beginning, and that was Nicholas. Now, Nicholas was technically, I think, my first introduction to Kendra Suda. It would eventually turn into being my man crush, basically my only man crush. Kendra Suda, I love you to death. But his portrayal of Nicholas in this series was fantastic. Now, for those who don't know what the series is, kind of indicating the whole idea of the Gangsta, but essentially in a really bad area, a very bad neighborhood, you have this group of two guys that do different jobs. And one of those guys is Nicholas. And as we find out very quickly, Nicholas is hard of hearing. He's pretty much deaf. But he's also what is known as a tag, which is somebody who is, I won't get into too much detail of exactly what a tag is, but just know that they're really strong. And we don't really get any kind of dialogue from Nicholas until the very end of the first episode. At this point in which these two, Nicholas and Warwick, which is his partner, end up confronting this police officer about this situation that they were working on. The police officer's like, no, I don't want to go with what you're asking for, because they wanted a different deal. And then we have, again, the true introduction to Nicholas when he walks up and kicks the police car up almost onto its side and just starts telling this guy, you don't tell us what to do. And again, this is, I think my first introduction to Kendra Suda and his ability to really kind of, I guess, act out a very rough, a guy that you don't want to mess with, technically a gangsta. And it had a little bit of a speech impediment in there that you would typically get from somebody that is deaf. And I think Kendra Suda's embodiment of this character was so perfect. I heard from so many people that were manga fans of this series that were just like, they nailed it. They pulled off this character so much. And it's a scene that will forever stay in my mind as one of the greatest real introductions to a character in anime history. I just immediately, from that moment, said, I love Nicholas. This guy he's strong, he's very intimidating, and he doesn't let his impediments keep him down. It's a strong dude, and I love him to death. Moving on to our next moment in anime history, we jump into Gate. Now, yes, I know it's an isekai, and a lot of people groaned at the thought of Gate. I know there's a little bit even a controversy surrounding this series when it first came out, but I didn't care because I loved it. And specifically, one scene I think solidified itself as a memorable moment in this series that I will never forget. And yes, this is a scene in the throne room. For those who don't know what the series is, it's basically the Japanese Self-Defense Force go through this portal that appeared in Japan, and they start basically going into that world to essentially seize control. And while they're very adamant about creating peace with the people on this other side, obviously they're foreigners, so they're being attacked, and as you would note it, being a fantasy world, they don't stand up very well to Japanese Self-Defense Force with their weapons. Insert scenes of helicopters going into forts and just completely decimating people. But this is equally something that happened when we first kind of met the king, or we at least had the main characters meeting the king. They come into this kingdom, they go into this throne room, they're trying to talk peace talks. But eventually, the dumb prince comes in. And this is one of those kind of clashes of culture. Obviously, with most stories about medieval times, kings and princes don't really have any sense of morals because nobody questions them. They have ultimate power. And that's what you really felt when this prince comes in. Despite the fact that we know He stands no chance against the Japanese self-defense force with their weapons. This guy comes in believing that nobody should question him, even going so far as to bringing a prisoner of war into the throne room. This girl that was captured when they went into Japan, they brought a couple people back with them, including this girl. So she was Japanese. She was a Japanese citizen, and he threw her to the ground in rags, not even knowing what they've done to her. She looks completely horrible. But this is great. And why I love this scene so much is because typically with anime like this, it's usually like the main character goes, no, this is terrible, but we shouldn't do anything. Let's wait. Let's wait. Let's wait. No, it didn't. They didn't do that. Itami, the main character, basically says, dispatch him now. Like they hesitated none. And they rushed in there and just wiped out the prince and everybody around them, picked this girl up and said, we're here. We're from the Japanese self-defense force. We're going to bring you back home. Don't worry. It was such a fantastic scene. It was one of those rare cases where you just want to jump up from your seat and say, yeah, because that's exactly what you wanted to happen. You're like, somebody help this girl. This is a Japanese citizen. She should not be here. This is wrong. And again, the prince is high and mighty. Like, you can't do this to me. I'm a prince. And then Tommy basically just tells his subordinate, handle him. And she just goes over there like, okay, cool, got this. And just beats the crap out of this prince. It was so good. It was violent. It was kind of shocking. Like, especially when you have all these guys coming up with shields and they're trying to defend their prince. And then they just get mowed down with machine gun fire. But it's like, again, it was that moment of like, yes, this is what I wanted to happen. I didn't want this dithering main character to go, oh, well, we'll solve this with peace. We'll step aside. No, they literally seen a captive. Things changed that moment. It was on the spot, mindset change from peace talks to why is this girl here? What have you done? It was so good. For my next one I have is Erased. Now with Erased, again, another series that has a lot of controversies around it. I took it from a completely different angle than most people did, and I really enjoyed it enough that I bought the Aniplex release of it. I think it's a beautifully directed series. I love it to death. I love the human nature element in it. The idea of this main character essentially going back in time and trying to prevent the disappearance of a lot of children. And what it turns into is this very human element, this idea of somebody trying to bring somebody out of darkness and into light. Specifically around Kaio. Kaio is this classmate of him that is severely abused by his parents. And specifically, I want to note episode 8. This is a scene in which we have Kaio come to Satoru's home. So the main character brings her to his home, and they kind of have her there overnight. But the scene specifically that I want to really kind of highlight is the breakfast scene. Again, this is the scene that somebody reminded me on a live stream, and I really appreciate it because this scene just, it had me. I was bawling out my eyes when I watched this scene, and when I watched it again, it had me in tears. Because nothing is spoken. There's no words spoken in the scene, but you see everything that needs to be said. Kaio walks in the next morning into the kitchen, and immediately she's greeted by a warm, cooked breakfast on the table. And immediately her eyes blink, and she sees pretty much a vision of what she experiences every morning at her home. Either a blank toast sitting on the table, or just a couple of yen. This is a girl that's never experienced a family life. She's never experienced a warm family, and she's never experienced a warm breakfast. This small child is so severely abused and neglected. This was a treasure to her. We often take a lot of things that we do in life and get in life for granted. And this was a case where we really got a clear example of, as compared to Satoru, what he takes for granted that Kaio never has. And it was such a beautiful scene. Like I said, no words were spoken. She walks in, she sees the vision, she starts tearing up, and the mother embraces her. It was such a beautiful scene, and it's basically the embodiment of what I love so much about the series, was just the idea of just reaching out to somebody and taking them into your warmth and taking care of them and protecting them when they can't protect themselves. But that's it. I'm going to leave it with that. I have tons more, but we're going to keep it for later. Like I said, I want to do the regular series of this. As I said before, please let me know in the comment down below, what are your greatest moments in anime history? In order to avoid spoilers for me, because yes, I haven't watched every show in history, please stick to just the show itself, the episode that it's on, and a vague idea of what we're talking about. That way, nobody else sees any spoilers involved. If it's something that I need clarification, I'll reply to you and find out what exactly is that actually hits you for it. But as always, I definitely appreciate you guys checking out this video. I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you did, please consider hitting that like button down below. It does help us out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon or through our tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that does. And y'all take care.